Okay, so when children are born, babies are born, they become children, whatever, they can sleep up to 21 hours a day, and that'd be a completely normal thing. They don't have a circadian rhythm. They're not sleeping because it's night, or not sleeping because they're just sleeping because they're still developing. They're still, if you think about it, they've grown from something smaller than the human eye can see to a 6 to 10 pound animal in the course of 9 months. And they're still growing. They're growing very rapidly. It's highly anabolic. They need, they're using their eyes for the first time. Really, they're using their ears, like, to a significant degree for the first time. Their sensories, like, for the first time, like, they're understanding moving their arm is actually them moving their arm, and then, like, they are something other than the oneness that they've developed in. So there's a huge amount of growth going in there, and so they need a lot of sleep. I was really fortunate. So I have 3 children. My first child literally slept 21 hours a day for about 8 weeks. And we were just like, what are people complaining about? Like, kids are so easy. Like, what's all this stuff about, like, not getting any sleep, And we were still like, if he coughed in the middle of the night, like, we both jumped up and ran across the house and, like, checked and made sure that everything was okay. But my second child, who is way bigger, totally different kid, hardly slept at all. Total pain in the butt. But over the course of 24 hours, he still slept a lot. It was just much more fragmented. And so it just makes sense that, like, this is still a developmental time. Again, as I say in almost every video, the most anabolic time in your life is while you're sleeping. If you want your kid to grow and their brain to grow and their body to grow and they're learning to grow, like, they have to sleep a lot. And then that slowly just decreases over the course of time until you become this adult phase, which most accurately should probably be described as your brain development, and primarily the prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning, the part that makes us the smartest animal on the planet. And for adult men, that can be as late as 25 years old. In women, it's usually 18 to 20-ish or 21. Men, it happens a few years later. But once you've sort of fully developed, you've gotten as tall as you're going to get, and you've gained all the muscle you're going to gain, and your brain's gotten as big as it's going to get, then you kind of hit this point that we know of adult sleep, which is like 8 hours a day. So 16 hours of life requires 8 hours of sleep to repair. So when you're younger, you need more. How much more? We don't know. It depends on when you're growing. Like, we'd like to think of kids in stages, but it's something like, when your kid is 18 months old, they should know 18 words or something like that. Like, I'm maybe making that up, but that sounds familiar to me. That there's these developmental milestones that you should do this by this time. Well, that's a gross average, right? Your kid might know 0 words at 12 months and might know 300 words at 24 months, and you don't know. Like, it's an overall average. So how much should a kid sleep? As much as a kid wants to sleep. How much should you make your kid sleep? As much as you can make your kid sleep. Because that's when your kid's growing. That's when your kid's getting better. So if you think about it, in the course of a day, and I remember when I took Spanish, my Spanish teacher used to say, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say that she said, you listen to 10,000 hours of English before you tried to say it. Or maybe it's 2,000. Probably 2,000 sounds more. So you've listened to 2,000 hours before you try your first word, before you can really kind of make a word. Before you're forming sentences, it's probably you've listened to 4,000 to 6,000 hours of it. So you think about your child. It's like, what you think you're teaching your child, like teaching your child how to use a spoon, your child isn't just learning to use a spoon. There's a billion things that are involved in your child even understanding like what a spoon is, why your child would want to hold a spoon, like what food is, there's so many things that are going on, and we don't understand how detailed what they're learning is. So the more they're learning, the more they need to sleep. And then their physical development, and this is something that's commonly quoted in modern literature of child development, is that kids aren't being allowed to be physical enough, understanding the consequences of gravity and hot and cold, and obviously you don't want to let your child maim themselves, but they need to fall down, they need to get hurt, they need to figure out the way things, the reason young kids pick things up and drop them or bang things to make a noise is because they're understanding cause and effect. Like if I hit this, it makes a noise. If I let go of this, it always goes there, right? Like there's a lot of learning going on there, and we don't remember it. We don't understand how complex that was to learn. So essentially, if you think about probably an hour of learning with your kid, if you wanted to solidify that, it would probably take 2 hours of sleep to make that a really durable memory. And so essentially, the more your kid can sleep, the faster your kid's going to learn, physically and cognitively. And then eventually, once emotions get into the game, understanding emotions, that's going to be the same thing. So there are guidelines you can look at. The interesting thing is if you go to sort of like European literature versus American literature versus, I don't know, Canadian or Australian, like you go to other English-speaking worlds and you look at their pediatric council's guidelines on, it all varies, right? Nobody has the right answer. But what we do know is that the more your kid sleeps, the more anabolic it is, the more your kid's growing, the faster your child is learning. And so you want to encourage all of that. When your child starts exhibiting behavior of lack of prefrontal cortex capability, right? They start losing, once you start losing the ability to influence them, if you tell your kid no, and usually your kid at least pays attention to you and looks at you when you say no, and then you tell your kid no and they don't even look at you in the same day, well, that kid's too tired to be learning anymore, right? Or, any sort of variant of that. Like if you just think about like when your child's behavior really, if you think of your kid as a learning machine, once you notice a very distinct drop off in that learning, quit trying to teach the kid, and put the kid in a crib, bassinet, or like whatever the case may be. And honestly, if your child sleeps for a while, that's great. But even if they don't sleep for a while and they just lay there, that's still okay. That's still better than continuing to cram information in sort of a full vessel. And so I couldn't possibly give you a guideline for this is how often your kid should sleep or how many hours your kid should nap during the day. It's honestly as much as your kid can sleep, as much as you can coerce your kid to sleep. It's better. It's better for their development. And then, of course, as you get older, you need less and less sleep. But there's no point in your life, all the way up until your 90s, or if you're fortunate enough to be a centurion and live into your hundreds, there's no point in your life where naps aren't beneficial. And it would be a completely separate topic to talk about how those naps are best shaped and what times of the days. If you're an adult, like why are you taking the nap? What are you hoping to benefit by taking the nap? That changes. But basically, from the time your child is born, denying them sleep would be like denying them nourishment. And as they get older, denying them sleep would be the same as denying them education or denying them any other sort of teaching or development. So it's a lot of, I mean, it's just sort of the societal conclusion or belief that sleep is this transient time, when it's not. It is actually the most productive time of our lives. And if you think of it that way, then you'll say, well, what can I do to do the best for my child? Well, the best thing you can do for your child is to stimulate and teach your child, and then allow them to sleep every second that they can possibly sleep.